Coming up on Arirang News, President Moon Jae-in says the election results last week show the South Korean people want to come together to overcome COVID-19. The government's top priorities are reviving the economy and protecting people's lives. Prime Minister Chung urges lawmakers to quickly pass the government's latest spending plan, which will provide direct payments to households in the lower 70% of incomes. Lawmakers are still negotiating the size of the payments and who gets them. And with a record number of South Koreans laid off as of last month, the government is planning to announce a special set of measures this week to support employment. It's 5 p.m. here in Seoul. Thanks for joining us on Arirang News. I'm Devin Whiting. The school year started today for around 1.5 million South Korean elementary school students in the 1st to 3rd grades, but they're learning remotely. Classes for 1st and 2nd graders will mostly be aired on TV by EBS, the state-run educational broadcasting system. 3rd graders are doing classes online through computers and smart devices. Kids in 4th grade and higher have already started in phases, so this means school is now in session for all of Korea's 5.5 million grade school students. Kindergartens, however, are closed indefinitely. President Moon Jae-in has called for a revamp of South Korea's support system for disabled people, saying they suffer more during crises. To mark Disabled Persons Day in South Korea on Monday, President Moon, through social media, thanked those who are dealing with the COVID-19 outbreak despite hardship and promised customized support for people with disabilities and their families. He said the crisis showed that vulnerable people need extra care, citing the need to let them know about relevant quarantine measures, social distancing schemes, and how to get face masks. People in South Korea, he said, must remember that everyone is equal when it comes to dignity and human rights. The mayor of Seoul, Park Won-soon, held a video seminar last Thursday to share with the rest of the world the experience his administration has gained battling COVID-19. The seminar was attended by 500 people, including Saeed Amidi, the founder and CEO of Plug and Play Tech Center, which is a global innovation platform. Also taking part in the one-hour conference were government officials from Los Angeles and Sydney. Mayor Park explained how South Korea's capital city has implemented drive-through and walk-through testing for quick and widespread diagnosis of the coronavirus. President Moon says the results of last week's general election reflect the people's desire to come together to overcome this national crisis. Speaking in a meeting with his top aides on Monday, Moon said first and foremost will be protecting people's lives and reviving the economy. Take a listen.
첫째도 둘째도 국난 극복입니다. 국민의 생명을 지키고 경제를 살리고 나서야 다음이 있습니다. 이번 총선의 민의도 국난 극복에 다 함께 힘을 모으자는 뜻이라고 생각합니다.
The president said that the casualties and socioeconomic damage from the pandemic could be likened to that of a third world war. He called on his economic team to build a crisis management system to protect firms, maintain employment, and manage risks, calling for creative and special measures. Moon said that he hopes South Korea will be the country that overcomes the crisis the fastest through cooperation and solidarity and will take the lead by turning crisis into opportunity. The country's quarantine and economic measures, he said, can become the global standard. While the president noted that there are fewer new cases of COVID-19, he said it's too early for people to let their guard down, calling for cooperation from the people for the early termination of the virus. President Moon also asked for cooperation from the National Assembly, saying parties need to take responsibility to help the country get through this. South Korean Prime Minister Chung has called on Parliament to swiftly pass the government's second extra budget proposal to help households affected by the pandemic. In his policy speech in Parliament on Monday, Chung said people's livelihoods are on the brink of collapse and asked lawmakers to pass it to help them in this difficult time. Last Thursday, the government submitted a proposal worth around $6.3 billion. It would provide payments of around $820 each to households of 4 or more whose incomes are in the lower 70%. The amount will vary depending on household size. The Prime Minister said the government will not fund the budget through debt, but will find the money in the existing budget and by cutting costs. The pandemic has made a difficult situation even worse in terms of jobs. With the number of people laid off at a record high, the government will announce a set of special measures sometime this week. Kim Jae-hee reports.
The COVID-19 pandemic has battered South Korea's job market. A record high of near 2.4 million people dropped plans to find work last month. The number of people in their 20s who gave up on job searching increased by almost 36% on year to stand at 412,000 as of March. And the number of people in their 40s that gave up on looking for a job increased by 29% on year to stand at 268,000. The number of those who have been laid off temporarily also hit a record high last month, surpassing 1.6 million. That's a whopping 364% increase from the same period last year, and highest since related data was first compiled in July 1983. A lot of those being laid off temporarily were in the education, dining, retail, and wholesale industries.
I get paid based on the days I've worked. I usually go in every day, the weekdays, but now, nothing at all. So we're actually having a difficult time at the moment, really.
According to a recent survey by Incruit, a local online job placement portal, 2 out of 3 companies in the country have canceled plans to hire new employees this year after the coronavirus outbreak. Amid the grim economic outlook, the South Korean government has pledged to lay out a package of measures to try and revitalize the sluggish job market this week. One economic expert says there needs to be extreme support measures to overcome this unprecedented crisis.
We're seeing the most serious situation since the 1997 financial crisis. Young people who have just graduated from college can't get a job and build up their career. The government needs to take extreme measures to maintain employment, support job creation, and provide financial aid to companies.
With the economic impact of the coronavirus outbreak not expected to end anytime soon, all eyes are on what kind of aggressive measures the government will unveil this week to revive the virus-hit job market. Kim Jae-hee, Arirang News.
Now, hiring might be down, but it is happening. South Korea's big companies have found ways to carry on and adapt to the quarantine situation. Ji-young reports.
Sitting 5 meters apart to maintain social distancing, more than 100 job applicants sat a public company's recruitment exam at a football stadium in Ansan, southwest of Seoul.
It was cold, so it was a bit hard to take the exam, but it's still a relief that I could.
Many companies put recruitment plans on hold due to COVID-19, but are now back to searching for new recruits. It normally takes around 3 days for one of South Korea's largest insurers, Hyundai Insurance, to test applicants in the first round of its hiring process, as all selected candidates have to gather at a set place. But this year, the company has turned to artificial intelligence instead to minimize human contact.
This year, we decided to replace face-to-face interviews with an AI interview to help applicants save their time without having to travel around and secure safety at the same time.
Other conglomerates, including Hyundai Motor Group, SK Innovation, and Kakao Corporation, are also using remote interviews to hire staff.
SK Innovation decided to resume recruitment to ease the reeling job market and help relieve job seekers' concerns.
As South Korean companies are increasingly introducing artificial intelligence and online interviews into the recruitment process, many job seekers are learning how to deal with this new approach.
University students who could graduate into an uncertain employment climate due to the pandemic say they're preparing with practice rounds of remote screening tests and online interviews, as interviewing online and in person are 2 different experiences. Ji-young, Arirang News.
Time now for an in-depth look at the global markets this afternoon, and for that I'm joined by Dr. Yang Jun-suk, Professor of Economics at the Catholic University of Korea. Sorry about that, Professor Yang, and thank you for coming on today.
Happy to be here.
Well, stock markets on Wall Street were up on Friday. In part, it seems, on hopes for a new treatment for the coronavirus. In Korea, though, the Kospi turned sharply lower this afternoon. What's the story in the markets as we start the week?
Okay, well, if you look at it internationally first, then Asian markets and American markets have been doing fairly well, though not spectacularly. If you look at the gains that they made over the past few weeks, they recovered somewhere between 1/3 to 1/2 of what it lost because of the coronavirus. But last week, the trading volume, especially in the U.S., seemed to be very low. Europe, they've been not gaining in the market like Asia or United States, and they have been recovering at a much slower rate, the stock market. That's probably because the countries of France, Spain, and Italy and United Kingdom have been hit so hard by the coronavirus. But the reason that we're going back to relative, I call it pseudo-normality because we're not completely back to normal yet. We're pretending to be normal, is that the Fed, the central banks of these countries and the government of these countries have done a lot to take the risk from the market by providing a lot of liquidity, providing a lot of loans, providing a lot of loan guarantees. So a lot of the danger, obviously not completely, but a lot of the danger that came from the coronavirus and the uncertainty have been taken by the government rather than the investors. So I think they look at it as a chance of making some money in the stock market as long as they keep either the investment very, very short so that they can move their investment in and out in a matter of days, or very, very long since they know that the market is underpriced, but they just don't know when it'll go back to more reasonable level of prices.
Right. Well, one factor last week we saw the Chinese economy shrink for the first time on record, at least since 1976. This was the first quarter. That's a concern for Korea, which depends a great deal on China in terms of exports. So what do you make of this contraction in China?
Okay, well, contraction basically number up to March, so it already happened, and that has been reflected in Korea's export figures as well. If you look at the first quarter, Korean exports to China, it fell by 8.1%, so that's slightly more than China's fall in the GDP. But Korean trade overall, exports overall have not done as badly because Korean exports of semiconductors has done better than what we expected it to do, partially because there's somewhat more global demand for semiconductors because, well, everybody's stuck at home, so they're using their computers or smartphones for entertainment or communication, and also partially because a lot of semiconductor users seem to be hoarding the supply of semiconductors. They're afraid that perhaps the supply will be unstable in the second half of the year. But still, we are very worried about the trade situation because, well, WTO estimates that global trade will fall by 16% to 32% this year. And previously, when we had a slowdown in global trade growth or fall in global trade volume, Korea's exports went down even further than those global numbers warranted. So if you just take these numbers at a face value, that means exports may fall more than 16 to 32%. And since Korea's GDP is about 43% of Korea's GDP are exports, that could mean a major hit on Korean GDP. Now, it probably won't be as far as a straight calculation of these numbers would indicate because the domestic demand would probably pick up some of the shortfall, but still, it's a frightening number that we should begin to prepare for.
Well, speaking of Korea's GDP, we'll see an estimate this week from the Bank of Korea on GDP growth for the first quarter. That and what else should we be watching for this week?
Okay, well, as far as the first quarter growth GDP numbers are concerned, Korea does have a fairly good chance of making a positive growth rate. I personally would be surprised if we did have a positive rate, but it is possible because Korea did not get hit as hard as some of the other countries. But still, the GDP numbers are probably the most important numbers that we should look at. Other numbers that we could look at is the financial institutions lending behavior survey. So much of what how hard Korea will be hit by the coronavirus will depend on how willingly are financial institutions going to make loans and how badly will the companies be able to pay back or not pay back their loans. So this report would be of interest. And then Bank of Korea is also releasing foreign exchange banks' foreign currency transaction status report. We need to keep an eye on whether the foreign currency is fleeing from Korea too quickly. Otherwise, we do run into a risk of currency crisis, though right now I place that risk at a very low percentage. And then foreign statistics, always the U.S. Manufacturing Purchases Index is an indication of how well or how badly U.S. manufacturing is going to do. And of course, as always, the U.S. unemployment insurance filing numbers, though at this point, we're just wondering whether it'll hit a historical low or historically high, or whether it'll plateau off. If it does plateau off, that may mean that the recession from coronavirus may not be as bad as people fear, but right now the odds of that seems fairly low.
All right, Professor Yang, we'll have to check back in with you on all of that. Thanks so much for coming on today.
Thank you.
And that brings us to the end of this newscast. Thank you for watching. More live news coming your way at 7 p.m. Korea time.